Hello, everybody. My name is Ethan, and I am a CFI in training. It's been a minute since I did my CFI training, and it's a little bit until I do my CFI check ride, so let's see if I still got it. In today's video, we're going to be talking about pilot qualifications, which is Task A of the Private Pilot License Airman Certification Standards. So in today's video, we're just going to go down through point by point. We're going to concern ourselves, teach you a little bit about all these different knowledge areas, and the goal is to get just an understanding of these knowledge areas. And then we'll discuss the risk management portion of it because that is very important. And then hopefully you'll be able to garner that knowledge, and when you're using it alongside your flying abilities and your experience that you gain, you'll be able to apply this knowledge and utilize the skill portion of it. So these we're not going to go in order from top to bottom, because one thing that's very important to first understand before understanding any of this, in my opinion, is medical certificates. So that's the thing that we are going to talk about first. So medical certificates. There are three different types of medical certificates that we can get. We can get a first class, a second class, or a third class medical. And these medicals all have different privileges with them, so what we can do with those medicals, as well as different expiration dates. And we need to concern ourselves with both, because for certain operations we need a certain class medical, and we need to get a medical every so often depending on how old we are. So one way that you can remember that is first understanding what privileges that you can have. So first is your best type of medical that you can get. A first class medical allows you to have the privileges of getting your airline transport pilot certificate, your ATP certificate. And if you have a first class medical and you have the first class privileges with it, then you are good to exercise your ability to fly an airliner, or use the privileges of your airline transport pilot certificate. If you have a second class medical, it is commercial pilot privileges. So if you have your commercial pilot license, you're then able to make some money with certain limitations. So you can exercise those privileges as long as you have the second class medical and it's still valid. And then with third class medical, that's just any private or recreational flying. So if I have a third class medical, I'm never able to just use it and go for commercial operations or anything like that. I'm just sticking to my private or recreational, whatever that may be. So the regulation that this comes from, which talking about regs over on the side here, is 6123. So this is our medicals regulation. So if we go to, and I just have it on eCFR, you can also get it in your paper 4A. But if you get into 14 CFR 6123, you'll see we have medical certificates, requirement, and duration. So it just lays it out word for word. It's a very wordy thing. Must hold a second class medical when exercising these different things. Must have a first class when exercising these specific things. So you can read through that reg, and it'll give you more specific information to all that. But the really useful thing about 6123 is it has this chart. And this chart tells us if you're under age 40 or age 40 or older, and how long the first class medical is valid for, and what things you can do with your medical. And this is very wordy. It's very difficult in my mind to read all that and understand it. And I was not able to find this picture online, but when I was doing my private pilot's license, there's this really useful chart that was in my private pilot study book, which just lays it out perfectly. So this is the one that I'll teach you off of. So again, as we've talked about before, we're concerning ourselves with calendar months. So this, if I got my medical and it's valid for 60 calendar months, that would equal 5 years. So if I got it, today is January 21st. If I got it January 21st of 2026, it wouldn't expire January 21st of 2031, which is 5 years from now. It would be at the end of this month. So it would be January 31st of 2026. And we utilize calendar months for everything with aviation. So that's an important thing to understand, that it's the same month, but the very end of that month is when it's due. So we can see the yellow here is operations requiring an ATP certificate, airline transport pilot. The red is commercial certificate. Blue is requiring a student recreational or private pilot certificate. So if I'm under 40 years old, I will have a valid medical for 60 total calendar months, no matter if it's a first class, a second class, or a third class. But depending on what medical it is, I will have different privileges with that. So if I get a first class medical for the first 12 calendar months, I'm allowed to exercise airline transport pilot privileges. But after that, I still have a valid medical for the remaining 48 calendar months to get that to 60, but I'm not able to use first class privileges. You see, now it turns to blue. That means I have a first class medical, but after the first 12 months, I have 48 months of third class privileges with my first class medical. And you may wonder, why is that? And it's essentially just because when you're exercising privileges of flying in an airline, they make it so much more important for you to be on top of your medical. Like, make sure that you're getting checked up often because they want you to be in your best health. They want to make sure that you don't have any heart problems, don't have any other issues that could get in your way and make you an unsafe pilot. So that's why they require it. If you're going to exercise those privileges, they require you to get a medical more often, to get checked up more often. So same thing with the second class. I have those second class privileges. I can fly operations requiring a commercial certificate for the first 12 months under that medical. But then the remaining 48, I can still operate, like it's private pilot limitations and privileges. But if I wanted to operate under commercial privileges, like if I wanted to get paid to fly, I would have to have that. I would have to be within that first 12 months, or if I wanted to do those operations, I would have to get another medical. And then if you're 40 years and older, it changes up just a little bit. You see, again, when you get older, your health deteriorates more, so they want to check you up even more. So you do, if you get a first class, you have your first 6 months being, you're allowed to do airline transport pilot certificate stuff. But then after that, it goes to a second class for 6 months, and then it goes to third for 12 months. So when you're 40 and older flying in the airlines, you got to get a new medical every 6 months if you want to keep flying for your job at an airline transport pilot certificate level. So this is a really important thing to realize. You will be asked this on a check ride. What medical covers what how valid they are and for how long, and what age you have to be. So remember, first class medical is your airline transport pilot privileges. Your second class is the commercial pilot. Third class is private pilot privileges. And then under 40 versus over 40, and you can see the difference here. So the next thing that we have for private pilot is the certification requirements, so the cert requirements. And if I look at the private pilot ACS, it says certification requirements, recent flight experience, and record keeping. So this is where we can look just directly to the regulations. 61-103 is eligibility requirements general for the private pilot. So in part 61, there's a lot of what are called subparts, which I just like to think of them as like chapters in a book. So part 61 is the entire book, and then this different subparts or chapters. So subpart E, subpart Echo, covers private pilots. And the beginning of subpart Echo is 61-102, which talks, just gives a little bit of applicability. And then 61-103 gives us our eligibility requirements. So in order to become a private pilot, we need to be at least 17 years of age if we are trying to get rated in a single engine land aircraft that's other than a glider or a balloon. So that's important for us. So being at least 17 years old, read, speak, write, understand English, receive a logbook endorsement to take your check ride, which as you fly more, you'll realize you got to get endorsed for a lot of different things, for solo cross country, for your check ride, to do your written, all those kinds of things. So you just need another endorsement to take your private pilot check ride. Pass a practical test, which that's the check ride itself. Meet the aeronautical experience requirements, so you got to do all the maneuvers, all the required things, as well as get the correct amount of hours, and then pass the knowledge test, which is the written, And all of this just states everything that you need to have in order to get your private pilot's license. You need to have all these things checked off if you want to become a private pilot. So the main important ones that we want to remember with that for certificate requirements, we want to remember 17 years old or older. We want to remember to read, speak, write, understand English. We want to remember that we need to get our written. And then I'm going to run out of room, but we want to be endorsed. And then we want to have all the aeronautical experience that is required. But there's a few other things in there that you can look through the regulation. But those are the main ones that we want to concern ourselves with. So then when it comes to recent flight experience, this is just one thing that you have to do for any time you're flying. If you want to carry passengers, you have to have a certain amount of flights done or landings done within the preceding 90 days. So that is when we focus on 6157. That's our regulation for our recency of flight experience. So if I go to 6157, it says no person may act as a pilot in command of an aircraft carrying persons or of an aircraft certificated for more than one pilot flight crew member unless they've made 3 takeoffs and 3 landings within the preceding 90 days and they acted as the sole manipulator of the flight control, so your flight instructor didn't just do everything for you. And they were performed in an aircraft of the same category, class, and type. So if I flew it in a Cessna 172, I have to do it in a Cessna 172. And if I want to carry passengers, then legally, within the preceding 90 days, I would have had to do 3 takeoffs and landings. For nighttime, it's a little bit different. So if I do my daytime landings and then want to carry somebody at night, those daytime landings don't count as my recent flight experience for nighttime. So I would have to do night takeoff and landing experience, which is the same thing, 3 takeoffs and landings within the preceding 90 days, except you have to do them to a full stop, and they have to be done during the time of an hour after sunset to an hour before sunrise. That's where they consider it to be night for you to log night landings. So hour after sunset to an hour before sunrise, that time chunk, if I do 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop, it can't be a touch and go. But if I go completely stop and then take back off, do 3 of those, I'm then good to carry passengers. And again, I got to be the sole manipulator of the controls. It's got to be done in the same category and class and type. So these are things that we really want to concern ourselves with, and that's where we can start to get into our risk management portion. So one thing that we really worry about is proficiency versus currency as pilots. So that, what we just described, is currency. We are, by the rules, by the FAA's rules for us, we are current in our plane. We've done our 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop at night, or we've done them in the daytime, and now we're good to fly passengers. But there's also this aspect of it that's proficiency. And proficiency means, are we comfortable, are we confident in our ability to safely operate the aircraft? And proficiency is way more important than currency, because I should always be current. I mean, I need to worry about currency. I need to fly and be current if I want to carry passengers. But let's say that I haven't flown for 89 days and I'm a brand new private pilot. It might not be the safest thing to go up. I mean, I've done my 3 takeoffs and landings, but 89 days ago, I'm still within the 90 days. But I still may not be proficient, and that's what we want to worry about. That's the big thing, is being proficient, because proficiency means we're going to be able to safely operate the plane. And aviation, that's the main goal, is safety with everything. Safety, safety, safety. So with that, we just want to focus on, am I proficient? So currency is something we definitely want to be, but proficiency is that much more important, because I do not want to put myself or others in danger just because I think that I'm able to do it. I feel confident enough because I flew 89 days ago and I'm legal. we never want to cut corners. We never want to cut corners on safety or make things more dangerous and add risk to something that hopefully shouldn't have very much risk. So that's a very important thing, and you will be asked about proficiency versus currency. Your instructor will always ask you. So just remember, safety is a very important thing, and you need to start thinking that way if you want to be a pilot. And then as far as record keeping goes, in our regulations, we have 6151, which is pilot log books. That is a regulation, which I don't have it pulled up here. I can just read it because I have my paper 4AM right here. But with record keeping, there's certain things that we need to log with training time. So in general logbook entries, we got to get the date, total flight or lesson time, location where the aircraft departed and arrived, type and identification of the aircraft, the name of the safety pilot, flight and ground training received from an authorized instructor. And there's certain things that we as flight instructors have to put into a logbook as well, which the flight instructor will worry about. That's not necessarily your job to worry about. But it's a good read to go through and just read 6151. But it's one of those things that it becomes habitual as you fly more. You're just going to get used to, okay, I put the date, I put the plane, I put the ID, I put how much hours. My CFI fills out what we did in the flight. That's one thing that is more a CFI's job. So from there, we can discuss a little bit of the privileges and limitations. So that is 61.113 from our FAR-AIM in 14 CFR 61.113. It talks about the different privileges and limitations of a private pilot. So as a private pilot, you're not able to make money to fly. I know, it really sucks. And you'll find out once you get your commercial, you're probably not going to make money to fly either. But with that, there's a few very important things. So like we said, private pilot may, for compensation, no person who holds a private pilot certificate may act as pilot in command of an aircraft that's carrying passengers or property for compensation or hire. Normally that person for compensation or hire act as pilot in command of an aircraft. So you can't get paid. But it then goes into very little distinct ways that you could maybe get reimbursed, or you could get paid for, like this, for compensation or hire. If you are pilot in command of an aircraft in connection with any business or employment, if it's only incidental to that business or employment, so like they were going to do the flight anyways, but now they're just able to pay you, or the aircraft does not carry passengers or property for compensation or hire. So an example of that would be like if I am a bigwig in a company and they're trying to get me to go over, and they're like, okay, how about you just fly yourself over and we'll pay you during that. And then this is important too. A private pilot may not pay less than pro rata share of the operating expenses of a flight. So pro rata share means if I pay for a flight and that involves fuel, oil, airport expenditures, or rental fees, if I pay for that flight, I am not able to let someone else pay more than me. So let's say that I have one passenger. We're going to split it 50-50. That would be pro rata share. If I'm carrying two passengers and myself, we can split it in thirds, and I got to pay the little bit, because it's 33, 33, 33. I'll pay the 34 because you're not able to be paid for that, and the FAA considers that kind of being paid if they're paying for that stuff. So pro rata share is a term that you'll get used to. You just want to pay your equal share, pro rata share. And then, like we said, there's a couple more things where you can get reimbursed for certain things, like you may act as PIC of a charitable nonprofit or community event flight if the sponsor and pilot comply with the requirements of that reg. You can be reimbursed for operating expenses if you're doing an operation sanctioned under the direction and control of a local, state, or federal agency or an organization that conducts search and rescue operations. So there's a bunch of different things in that regulation that you can read, figure out, okay, I'm not going to be able to get paid for much. This is never going to happen in my life where I'm able to get paid, but on the very, very small off chance that that could happen, here's my regulation that supports it. So, like we said, that's 61,113 right there. I'm going to just write pro rate of share because that's a really important one. And then also just remembering we're not able to carry passengers or property for compensation or hire unless there's some very specific things. Required documents, that's another one. Required documents is very simple. We need a few things on us when we fly. So we need to have a valid FAA medical. As a private pilot, remember, we only need a third class to be operating with those privileges. We need to have a government-issued photo ID. So it's gotta be a photo ID. And then we also need to have our pilot certificate. So we do have temporary certificates, which are the paper that you get when you first get it. And then you also have the legit certificates that are the card itself. Whichever one you most recently got, that's going to be the valid one. So you'll just want to carry that on you. You want to have all three of those to make you legal to fly. If you're trying to fly, you need to have all of those things. And then lastly, the last little thing that we're going to talk about is Part 68 Basic Med Privileges and Limitations. So in Basic Med, there are a lot of different things, and the FAA has a nice little thing on it that that describes what Basic Med is, describes what the limitations are on it, everything like that. But essentially, Basic Med is a medical for people that can no longer get a medical. So there's a certain date that somebody has to have had a medical after, which is July 14th, 2006. And then let's say that they can't get a medical, but they still want to fly, just for recreational purposes. They can get Basic Med, which is essentially you just have to get a medical examination by a doctor. You have to do some online education courses. You have to have the course completion certificate and have your U.S. driver's license. And then voila. If you do all that, complete the course, get a comprehensive medical examination checklist and a physical exam with a state licensed physician. If you get all that, now you're good to fly. You just also have to carry your course completion certificate with you. And with that, there are specific aircraft and operating requirements that you have. So that is something that you will have to know for your check ride. And essentially, you can't fly a plane that's able to carry more more than 7 occupants. You can't have more than 6 passengers on board. So including yourself, that would be 7 occupants if you had 6. You can't have a max takeoff weight of more than 12,500 pounds. And again, this is all right here. I'm just reading it also from 61.113I. It's in the reg as well. You can't fly above flight level 180, 18,000 feet. You can't go faster than 250 knots. Can't fly outside of the United States unless otherwise authorized. You can't fly for compensation or hire. And that's essentially it. There's those few rules. Can't get paid. Can't go too fast. Can't go too high. And you can fly under IFR or VFR. And you can't be too heavy. Can't have too many people. Again, that's all on this. You just look up what is Basic Med, and the FAA has a publication right here on Basic Med. That'll give you all the information that you need to know. And yeah, so Basic Med, pretty much for old guys. You're not going to have to worry about it too awful much if you're a young person trying to fly, but that is something that could apply when you get older, and I'm sure it'll change by that time. But the last little thing, and this is partnered with Proficiency versus Currency, is flying unfamiliar aircraft or operating unfamiliar flight display systems. So again, we're worried about proficiency. We're worried about being able to safely operate the aircraft. So let's say that I have flown a Cessna 172 my whole life, but with steam gauges, so we got the 6-pack, and we may have a GPS, maybe not, maybe a VOR or two. And then I hop in a new 172, and now this thing has a glass cockpit. It's got a G1000 in it. So all big computer screens and no 6-pack like I'm used to, no little VOR receivers like I'm used to, anything like that. The proficiency aspect of it is I have never flown this. I may not be able to best operate it. The currency is, well, I've flown a Cessna 172. I've done my 3 takeoffs and landings in a Cessna 172, and the reg says nothing about the instruments inside the plane. So technically, I could fly it. But again, we want to worry about that safety. And with that, if I am flying in an aircraft that I don't know what the instruments are saying, or I don't know how to turn the engine on, or I don't know how to do whatever, it's not going to be safe. So what I recommend is doing a flight with an instructor. If you get into a new plane and you're like, man, I don't understand what any of this means, rather than just winging it and hoping for the best, just do a quick flight. Get a quick ground lesson on it. Play around with it a little bit to the point where you can feel comfortable. And that's the best thing that you can really do, because if you try to just wing it, if you try to be like, oh, well, I know what I'm doing, I can figure it out, you'll find yourself getting behind the plane, and that can lead to a lot worse things. If I am too distracted by something, trying to configure the GPS, well, then I may be off on my altitude or not see that I'm descending a lot, or whatever it may be. I may not have my eyes outside for traffic around me. So again, we just want to focus on being safe, and with that safety comes just knowing what we're doing. Being familiar with the plane that I'm flying, being familiar with all of those things. So that is Task A Pilot Qualifications. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.